Okay, what's up guys? I'm back with another YouTube video here. Here's the series I've been promising forever that I shot a few times and deleted, and hopefully I don't delete this one. So yeah, hopefully you're finally seeing my tutorials on how to take photos. So what are we going to learn today? What am I going to try and teach you? Now, I'm not a certified master photographer. I picked up photography as a hobby because it's something I enjoy and love, and I really got into kind of the details of settings and how they work, and I want to kind of explain that to you guys. So the stuff I'm teaching you can be applied with your basic DSLR, even the little point shoot cameras here, and to some extent even your cell phone can benefit from some of the advice that I'm giving today. Over this series I want to teach you the three kind of fundamental settings in digital photography. It's aperture, ISO, shutter speed. In this episode we're going to be talking about ISO, and I'm going to be teaching you ISO using program mode or P mode on your camera. So most cameras have a little dial that'll allow you to adjust settings. Today we're going to be using P, program mode. Basically, program mode is another way to say advanced, but it gives you control over your ISO. And to kind of demonstrate what ISO does, we're going to use that mode. So I went and took a series of photos in different ISO settings just to kind of show you the results of what happens, and we'll kind of zoom in and pick apart the photos. So hopefully by the end of this video you get a better understanding of what ISO is. On the very base level, we'll just get into it. ISO is the sensitivity of your camera's sensor. So with a more expensive camera, your camera is going to have better performance between the ISO values, and we'll kind of get into those details. But a reason a camera might be more expensive is because the ISO, or the sensitivity of the sensor is more stable than, let's say, a cheaper camera, where if you crank the ISO you'll get a ton of noise in your image. And you can do that with expensive cameras too. Show you the downsides of high ISO, but yeah, if on a very basic level it changes the sensitivity. Now what does that do? It changes how bright or dark your image is. So ISO is used a lot of times it's the easiest setting to change when things are either too bright or too dark. Let's say you're photographing a concert and all your pictures are coming out really dark. One really easy trick to that: increase your ISO. The downside to that, the higher your ISO, the more digital noise, and we'll kind of go over digital noise here in a little bit, showing you the impacts of high ISO and what it does in terms of noise. So let's get into it. I'm going to show you my screen here. All right, here we are using Lightroom Classic, and we're not going to go over how to use the software. Basically what we're going to be looking at is right over here in the corner is the histogram and all the settings. This is what we want to pay attention to in hopes that your understanding of ISO gets a little better. So like I said, with program mode, all my other settings on the camera are determined by the camera itself to get a proper exposure. So with the first image, I started in auto ISO, and the camera thought to get a properly exposed image with all the details that ISO 500 was the way to go. The aperture f1.6 and a shutter speed of 1/48 was a second. Now, my focus, if you pixel peep, it's a little off. That's because I was moving while I smiled and my shutter speed is so low. But we're not worried about shutter speed or focus in this episode. We're worried about ISO. Now, if you look in my eyes, you can't really see it on the screen. If you're really pixel peeping on my monitor, you can see some digital noise. If I throw this on Facebook, nobody's gonna notice. I could happily turn this photo in using program mode for a class or to just post on my new Facebook photo. So program mode, don't know what you're doing, you bought a fancy camera, instead of using the A+ mode, throw out the program mode and start messing around with ISO if things are too light and too dark. So as you can see along the bottom here, we have a series of photos that we're going to go through, all at different ISO values. We're going to kind of show how we've changed the ISO and what it's doing. For the most part, in program mode, they're all going to look pretty similar. You'll see in the second half of the video that the images differ. The images are completely different, and that's kind of to show you exactly what ISO does. So let's continue on. So here we go. We're going to start with ISO 100, and I'm going to move up as we continue through these images one stop. So when you rotate the wheel or the setting by one, that's kind of what I'm adjusting here. Some cameras might be able to have steps in between these stops of light. For sake of ease, we're just going to go to the next stop. And that way we don't have like a billion pictures, and you'll kind of get the point what higher ISO does, what lower ISO does. So things still look pretty good here. You'll notice my aperture changed a little bit, got a little bit wider, and the shutter speed slowed down drastically. So that kind of did some stuff to our details. But overall, they look pretty similar. This one's a little brighter. But yeah, still looks pretty good. Now, for the sake of the histogram, you kind of want most of your information to be right here in the middle. For a properly exposed image, you might have some areas. You'll see in my shadows, which are peaking. That's right down here. Don't worry about it too much. Don't mean much in terms of this. Just kind of something to keep track of. You want most of your information here when you're trying to edit your photos. Okay. We're not worried about editing. We're worried how dirty my face looks. And okay, so we're moving up one stop. ISO 200. Very similar. Settings on the camera almost exactly the same. Not much of a difference. ISO 400. Same kind of thing. You'll see that that's my phone there. So to take all these shots, I was connected to my cell phone so I could see what I was taking an image of and adjust the settings without touching the camera on the tripod. Maybe I'll do a small episode on how to take a self-portrait and connect your camera with your phone. That could be kind of neat. But yeah, okay, so our ISO steadily increasing. Not much is changing, so what does ISO do, Eric? It doesn't seem to be doing much. With this camera, we're not going to see it yet because the ISO on my 5D Mark IV is pretty powerful. So yeah, right now we're in program mode. Camera's picking all the settings. The only thing we're changing is ISO. Everything looks the same except for my turbo ability to pull focus. So I was rushing through this, but that's okay. Oh, I actually pulled focus in this one. Okay. Now we can kind of see a little bit of what a higher ISO does. We're at 1600 here. The aperture and shutter changed a little bit. They're within the same values. But you'll notice in the background of my image, you'll see these spots. It doesn't look bad. Not now. You would never be able to notice this posting it just online. This isn't something. But some people get super frustrated at this. These little speckles that kind of look like a little film grain, digital noise. The higher your ISO, the worse this is going to be. And we'll see that in some of the later images. Right here, I'd be happy to shoot at this ISO. Most cameras shooting at this ISO going to perform roughly around this quality. Some of the lesser expensive DSLRs, you'll see the digital noise look a lot worse. It won't look like a film grain. It'll look more pixelated and kind of ruin the image a little bit. That's kind of what ISO does and what we're going to kind of continue to show you. So now, next stop, 3200. Okay. Now Lightroom does clean up your noise a little bit so it's not as pixelated, but you'll notice still there. Now the details on my face don't see the noise yet, so it's not ruining the main part of my image, which my subject right here in focus. Look at all the details. The noise isn't bad. It's not ruining the details. When we get higher in ISO, those details are going to start to fade and it's going to start to ruin the image. Again, we missed focus, but you'll start to see, well, partially because I missed focus, we see noise in the subject now, and we're creeping up. We're at ISO 6400. Now, with a camera like this, I would say shooting a concert, shooting an event, low light, 6400 is probably almost your go-to ISO. It's pretty high, but when you're in the dark, you're gonna be fine. Okay. 12,800. We're really climbing now. Let's see. Okay. Look. So if we go back 2 images because I really pulled. Look at all the detail in my mustache, my gross face here. And then again here, all that detail's gone, replaced by noise. Here's where the ISO is going to start to hurt your image in terms of details. Now we'll go up again. And now it's starting to even distort our colors a little bit. 25,600 ISO. Okay. Keep going. 32,000 ISO. So, this is the highest ISO. My camera can technically go higher, but this is the highest ISO value that my camera can reach. Your ISO values may differ depending on your camera, but you'll just notice this is where high ISO ruins an image. Now, if you look at the rest of my camera settings, we'll get into aperture and shutter speed later, but you'll notice they changed drastically from our first image, where we had a wide open aperture, barely any shutter speed. We've got a clear image. Now if we go back, we've got a much shallower aperture at 5.6 and a much higher shutter speed. And that's because the ISO is so high, it's letting so much light into the camera that the camera has to adjust the settings to make everything else darker. And we'll see that even though this might be a usable image to someone, I would not turn this image in or post it online, other than to show you kind of the examples of what high ISO does. Now, to kind of show you what a high ISO will do in a dark room, I turned off all the lights in my room except for my computer monitor, which was very dimly lit, and I left my ISO at 32,000, but I look really bright. All the lights are off in my room. I still have all that digital noise, but I've got a clean looking image. Well, not clean. I've got a visible image where something like my little point and shoot camera, this would be much darker. Same thing with my cell phone, which has the sensor size of a Tic Tac, even in night mode. It might perform pretty well in night mode. The ISO's pretty good on the cell phone, but yeah. This is kind of what ISO does. If you're shooting out bright sunlight, you never want to have your ISO this high. You want to keep your ISO as low as possible, shooting out in the day. You're in a dark room, concert hall. Let's say you're out at a party, shooting a birthday party, and it's night, dark. All that's kind of lit in the room is the birthday candle. Crank that ISO. Okay. So what I did for the second half is I set what I thought the settings, what I would normally shoot to get an image that I would like in a self-portrait. I obviously missed my focus, but these are the settings I would choose in full-on manual mode. I'd shoot wide open at f1.4 because I shoot everything wide open. That's just my style, and we'll talk about that in the aperture episode. But for now, we're just going to go over ISO. Shutter speed I like to keep pretty fast so I don't get any motion blur. Doesn't help if you can't pull focus. Please ignore the focus for this photo. Concerned about the ISO. So for the lighting that was in my room, I felt 1250 was the appropriate value. So we're going to leave aperture value f1.4, shutter speed at 125. We're only going to change the ISO to kind of show you what it does to the image. So starting again, ISO 100. Very, very dark. There is almost no light coming in. The sensor is not very sensitive at this point to light. So you can see, very, very dark. ISO 200. Got a little more light in the sensor. Still not usable. So 400. Okay, we can start to see something that's getting there. There's detail, but it's still pretty dark, and you can see that on the histogram here, where all my detail is just lying in the dark. As I change my ISO up, hey, here we're getting a little better, and starting to pull focus a little bit better. Still not quite there. ISO 1600. This is actually really usable. Now, we got detail in my face. The really gross detail. Got a little bit of noise, but it looks like a nice film grain. This is totally usable. ISO 3200. Now we're starting to hit the opposite end of spectrum where things are getting too bright and my highlights are going to take over the image, but still a usable image. Crank it even higher, you'll see how sensitive it gets. And then we're going to jump up another step, and all our information is just falling off the histogram. There's no detail in my highlights. It's just taking over the image. And again, totally missed focus on this one, but that's not the point. And then finally, probably my best focus yet, unusable image because all that information is in the highlights because my ISO is at 32,000. And the other settings on my camera are set to let as much light in as possible. So for my style, the ISO value that I would use, probably around 1600. So yeah, But run it back. Basically what ISO does, changes the sensitivity of your camera to light. How bright is it going to be? How dark is it going to be? The higher your ISO, the brighter your image is going to be. The darker your ISO, the lower your ISO, the darker your image is going to be. So, how do you choose the right ISO? Start in program mode, go to the automatic ISO. It's going to give you a setting. My camera told me 500 was correct ISO, and it chose the other settings for me. If we're going full on manual mode, which we'll go over in more detail in later episodes, then you kind of judge based on the room. I always set my aperture at a very specific value, and then I set my shutter speed at a value where the image is going to be fully in focus, and I'm not going to have to worry about motion blur. So I use my ISO to determine how bright or dark my image is. That's kind of the best use for ISO. We'll talk about how I adjust ISO for concerts in our aperture video. But for now, this was our lesson on ISO and what it is. And yeah, so next episode, we're going to talk about shutter speed using TV mode on the camera. And we'll go over all the adjustments and what shutter speed does, because got some really cool things. And then once we finished all 3 episodes, maybe you'll have a better understanding of how to use your camera in manual mode, or maybe you'll decide that a mode like AV or TV, maybe even P mode, is the best mode for you to use the way you like to shoot. So hopefully this helps. Stick around for the next episode. I know we're all kind of stuck at home, so hopefully this helps you pass time and learn something new. All right, leave your comment below and I'll respond to you. Let's talk about photo stuff. All right, see you guys later. Bye bye.